to step out for 5 minutes around 10 o'clock or so.
Starting the video. Video's live.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting for Wednesday, January 12th of 2022. First of all, I'd like to start by acknowledging that we're gathered remotely and virtually on various parts of the traditional ancestral territories of the Coast Salish peoples. I'd also like to welcome alternate Director Justice to the meeting. He's in for Director Toporowski today, and Director Martman has given us a heads up. He may have to leave the meeting briefly at around 10 o'clock, so if he disappears, he will be back. With that, we have an agenda before us, and I would entertain a motion to approve that agenda unless there are any late items or additions. Motion to approve the agenda as circulated. Seconder? That's seconded. Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor? And opposed? That carries. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item of business is item M1, which is adoption of the Committee of the Whole meeting minutes of December 8th, 2021.
Can I have a motion? Moved. Seconded. Errors or omissions? Seeing none. All in favor? And opposed? That carries. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item M2 is adoption of the Special Committee of the Whole meeting minutes of December 9th.
Again, can I have a motion? Moved. Seconded. Errors or omissions on this set of minutes? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? That carries. Public input period. Do we have any public input, Ms. Legault?
None this morning.
All right. Next item.
So we're on to staff reports. Item R1 is a report from Emergency Management on a sub-license site agreement for Mount Sicker 911 repeater site. And the proposed recommendation is that it be recommended to the board on January 12th that the 3-year sub-license site agreement between the Canadian Coast Guard and the Cowichan Valley Regional District for the Mount Sicker 911 repeater site be approved.
Do we have a staff report or anybody who needs to speak to this? Director Morrison, I see your hand up. I thought I saw your hand up.
Yeah, move the recommendation.
Oh, recommendation is moved and seconded. I see Mr. Elzinga popped up. Is there any background here, John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to suggest that Mayor Greider is also on the call, but I believe the staff report is fairly self-explanatory.
It is. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor? Oh, Director Nicholson, was that a vote or oh, that was it?
I had a question. How does Mosaic or Timber West stand to? Do they stand to benefit from this? Do they use the services of this tower and so, or this radio receiver and so forth?
Hi, Merrick Ryder. To the director, they only benefit financially. Otherwise, it's just part of normal communications for fire dispatch in the area that they might benefit from.
All right. Any other questions? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. All in favor of the motion? And opposed? That carries. Ms. Legault.
Item R2 is a report from Legislative Services Division on draft AVICC resolutions, and this is for direction.
Okay, so what's the will of the committee? What do we want to do with this? Don't everybody speak at once. I mean, there's a couple of recommendations in the staff report. Perhaps somebody wants to move those, or what do we want to do? Director Morrison.
I'd like to move the recommendations, both 1 and 2, and I'll speak to 1 if there's a seconder.
We have it's seconded by Director Marsh. And Director Morrison, you wanted to speak to number 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to make it clear that this is the sort of normal, in regards to number 1, this is the the normal avenues available to us on matters such as these. This is go through our area associations, and hopefully it makes muster there and goes on through to UBCM. But I'll suggest that there's likely to be a need for additional work on this beyond that as well, beyond having a resolution put to the membership at AVICC and to UBCM. I know that I'm assuming everybody has been looking at the assessment roles, not only for their area but maybe other areas. And I've had a little bit of analysis done, and even with the freeze that is in place and what number one seeks to address, and I know not all areas have the significant forestry holdings in their area that I do, but it looks like for this year, when we apply the cost per 100,000 to the assessment rolls, another 10% is eroding from the base of the assessment requisition for Area F. So at one point we were, half of our revenues came from private managed forest lands. Today it's barely over a third. That's really had an impact on the residential and other tax classes. So I would really ask for your support to not only send this through the process, but I will likely be coming back with perhaps a plan to go to BC Assessment and the Provincial Ministry of Finance as well, because this is creating an undue hardship for the everyday property owners and residential and business property owners in our area. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Morrison. Any other comments on the motion? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? And opposed? That motion carries. Thank you very much. Oh.
Excuse me, Chair, I did have my hand up. I did have...
I'm sorry, Director Smith. I didn't see you. Go ahead.
Thank you. But now the motion has passed, so that's a little bit awkward.
Did you have an amendment or something, or just a comment?
I had a comment, and I wanted to indicate that I don't support number 2 at this time. So...
Okay, I'm going to exercise my discretion as chair and sever the two. We'll consider that number 1 has passed. I mean, there is always a provision to sever a motion that has more than one piece to it. So for number 2, I would open the floor to discussion, and I'll start with Director Smith.
Thank you. I would just like to go make a comment regarding number 1. I also have issues with the forest class 7. Last year it was reduced by 2 million. This year it's, I believe, about 1.4 million. And so every year it's eroding, and I definitely support Director Morrison moving forward in with BC assessment on that. For number 2, this is an interesting resolution to put forward, but have we really investigated what the ramifications would be within our community if we moved forward with this speculation tax at this time? It may have consequences that we haven't explored, and I was just wondering if there was some form of investigation into this before we put this resolution forward. Thank you. Maybe staff could answer that if we've done an investigation on the outcome. Thank you.
Anybody from staff want to weigh in? I have some perspective from the North Cowichan side, but Mr. Carruthers. And hey, welcome back.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to defer to Ms. Legault. Obviously, I've not been here during the development of this report, but I'll let Ms. Legault talk about what was done in preparation of this report, and I'm here to offer any perspective.
Thank you. Through the chair, there hasn't been an in-depth analysis on the effects in the Cowichan Valley per se. Staff were simply following the direction of the committee to draft a resolution for submission. And for that reason, it was drafted in such a way to request a review and to look at the impacts on the areas adjacent to designated specified areas. This certainly isn't an area, taxation where it would be within my field of expertise, so there wasn't an in-depth analysis done, and there is an opportunity to do it if the province chooses to move forward with the review.
I would just interject myself here, Director Smith. We passed a similar resolution at the North Cowichan Council table. We actually wrote to the finance and housing ministers to ask that this tax that they look at putting the tax in North Cowichan. And the reason we did that, we did a little bit of analysis, and we found that our assessments and property values, not the assessments, the actual sale prices, according to the real estate board, were substantially greater than the increases that were found in both Nanaimo and Victoria. Now, whether that's because of this tax or not, that's a separate issue, but the analysis sort of anecdotally did show that there were some differences, and that those differences were creating more affordability problems in our jurisdiction. So I can set your mind at ease a little bit on that. Yes, there's always unintended consequences, and I think that's why the resolution is wise in calling for a review, and that review would maybe identify some of those unintended consequences, and we can then go from there and determine what the right thing to do is. Go ahead, Director Smith.
Just following up, it's not asking for a review, it's requesting the inclusion of the Cowichan Valley in the province's speculation tax regime.
Actually, it's not. It says, be it resolved, the province consult with local governments on an evaluation of the speculation of vacancy tax, including a review of the specified areas and the impact on areas adjacent to the designated. You can only look at the therefore be it resolved. That's what we're asking for.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so just to backtrack, I now need a motion for number 2 because we passed number 1. I have number 2 moved and seconded. Any further discussion on this?
I have my hand up, Mr.
Yes.
Chair.
Director Acton, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Smith, for clarifying that. I can see how that this resolution could have different consequences and perspectives of how it's read. I think here in Shawnigan, or like other areas that have recreation properties and old, we could see a major consequence that I don't think we would want to see, where we have old cabins which we would like to preserve and keep that form and character, and what it would do is force families to sell their recreational properties, and instead would encourage large development and lots to be maximized for their land value and potential of building. So I think this is really something that needs to be looked at from multiple different angles. And so I'll support the motion, but I think as far as our community goes, the ramifications of a tax like this might outweigh the benefits.
Thank you, Director Acton. Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can suggest strongly, and it may be just anecdotal at this point, but the effects of not having this speculation tax in place is detrimental to my electoral area, especially in the recreation and waterfront areas. I don't know if Director Kuhn is experiencing the same, but what we see happening now is a flight of money into our area because of the fact that our neighboring jurisdictions have this, and there's money, but not the people that are coming in and investing in the recreational properties in my area, which is resulting in a slow but steady hollowing out of how our communities are. We've got people that are buying properties that are maybe spending 2 weeks at them in the summertime, and are absent the rest of the time. So this is driving up prices unrealistically. People are now complaining that they can't afford to live and work in what has been historically the least expensive place to live in the Cowichan Valley. So I think that we have the ability between now and when this is on the floor at the AVICC convention to do that research and get this withdrawn if we find that there's detrimental effects. But I think that we should get this considered and before the deadline and get that research done. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Morrison. Director Marsh.
Yeah, just following on what Director Morrison said, and again, I didn't check this out, but I have every reason to believe it was correct at the time. Several months ago, a very good friend of mine, her daughter and son-in-law had to leave their rental in Surrey, and they were struggling, and he works in local government actually. And I said, well, why don't they just move back to Lake Cowichan? And she said, they can't afford to. It's cheaper to buy a home in Calgary than it is in Lake Cowichan. And I was gobsmacked. If that's true, that's actually nuts. So I fully support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Marsh. Director McGonigal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Director Marsh, for bringing up Lake Cowichan. The highest assessment in the regional district this year, a 43.38% increase average. And that is particularly a result of influx of outside money coming to purchase these properties, whether it be for VRBOs or Airbnbs or recreational activities, and it's impacting the whole West End on affordability. So where it was affordable previously, it has not seen that now. So I would most certainly respect the resolution and support it going forward and try to find a solution. When we're wedged between the two entities that do have speculation taxes, where would you afford your money to be put? In one that is not, and that's where we reside.
Thank you, Director McGonigal. I see no other hands, so I'm going to call the question on the resolution. All in favor? And opposed? That motion carries. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item is R3, Report from Facilities and Transit Division regarding a Memorandum of Understanding regarding the Nanaimo Cowichan Express. And the recommendation is that it be recommended to the board that the Memorandum of Understanding between the CVRD, the Regional District of Nanaimo, and BC Transit for operation of the interregional transit service for the 5-year period from March 28th, 2022 to March 27th, 2027 be approved.
I see Director Stone's got his hand up. I think he wants to move this. I don't know. No? Okay. You have a question or a comment? Go ahead.
Well, lots of questions and comments. First question is, how did this possibly happen? This MOU is non-functional. Having only pick up northbound and only drop off southbound completely makes the route non-functional. So if someone wants to get the bus from Duncan to the airport, they can't because they're not allowed to get off at the airport. If someone did get to the airport and wanted to get home to Duncan or North Cowichan or anywhere in between, they're not allowed to because they only do drop-offs in the southbound route. So throughout this process, from day one, we talked about the fact that the Duncan, Cowichan, or Ladysmith Express was a pilot project and that we would need to reallocate those hours back to the local routes once this interregional transit system became in place. The report talks about this being like the commuter service, yet this was not what was proposed, neither during consultation with residents, nor to the local governments that are involved in this. It was always an interregional transit route, not a priority, can't get off. Basically, once you get on in Duncan, you can't get off until you're in Nanaimo. Once you're on in Nanaimo, you can't get off, or nobody can get on southbound, you can only get off. So if someone were to get on the bus in Duncan, they cannot get off in Cowichan Commons, in Ladysmith, at the airport until they get to the final destination in Nanaimo. So my question is am I reading this wrong? Because I hopefully am, because otherwise I absolutely can't support the MOU as it's presented.
I'll turn to staff. I see Mr. Elzinga's popped up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to introduce Rochelle Rondo from CBRD Transit, as well. Ms. Myrna Moore is representing BC Transit on the call today. So I'm going to defer to Rochelle for that question.
Rochelle.
Good morning. Thank you. I'll just do a brief introduction, if I may, and then speak to the question. So as the committee is aware, we've been working towards implementing this new transit route between the Cowichan Valley and Nanaimo over the past few years through collaboration with the Regional District of Nanaimo and BC Transit. Many of the pieces have already been approved, as noted in the staff report, and the proposed Memorandum of Understanding for operations between the Regional District of Nanaimo and BC Transit is one of the last items outstanding prior to implementation of the service in March of this year. So the proposed Memorandum of Understanding is to define the roles and responsibilities for each party and set the tone for future continued collaboration as we roll out this new service. I would like to acknowledge Myrna Moore, Senior Government Relations Manager from BC Transit, who has joined us for the meeting today, and we're both happy to answer any questions the committee may have. And so speaking to the direct question from Director Stone on the pickup and drop off situation, we discussed this internally with our working group, and the intention is that a resident or a rider leaving the Cowichan Valley would pick up the NCX, the Nanaimo Cowichan Express route, say in Duncan, Cowichan Commons, or Village Green Mall, any of those local stops here. And they would be using the Nanaimo Cowichan Express route and paying their $7.50 fare. And they could get off at the Nanaimo airport, because that is in the RDN, or any other location in Nanaimo Regional District. The intention in doing so is that we are not replacing the Cowichan Valley conventional service. There, in regards to the Ladysmith route, for example, with Route 36X, which is an express between Duncan and Ladysmith, it runs a different service and the route is different than the Nanaimo Cowichan Express route as well. I can speak to that more fully, but the intention is just not to replace the existing service that we have for the conventional, and we acknowledge that the fare is higher for the Nanaimo Cowichan Express route as well than the local service.
But go ahead, Director Stone.
Yeah, the list is long, so I'll save it for one follow-up for now until we come back around. So explain to me then, just reading the staff report versus what was just said. So you're saying that someone can indeed get off the bus at the airport and then catch the bus at the airport back into Duncan?
Yes, sorry if it wasn't clear. What is proposed is that a resident or rider being picked up in the RDN would be traveling south to the Cowichan Valley area, and they would get off in the Cowichan Valley area. A rider being picked up in the Cowichan Valley area would, be picked up at any stop in the Cowichan Valley, travel north, and get dropped off in the RDN. They wouldn't necessarily take it from Village Green to Cowichan Commons, for example. That's not the intention of the service.
So we're just sacrificing that ridership and hoping that they'll stick with the existing routes.
Well, I mean, yes, we're hoping that they will stick with the conventional route if they have to travel locally.
Okay, so I'm just trying to find the spot in the report here, so just give me a moment. If there's other questions, Mr. Chair, I'll save my question here, but I'm just trying to find in the report because it is unclear. It says the NCX will travel via RDN and CBRD at the following 7 stops. And the other issue is there's not a stop in Chemainus, which seems very strange. But to avoid competition, stops along southbound trips, it says in the Cowichan Valley will be drop-off only. So, for example, someone in Ladysmith could not catch that express bus the 7 times it drives through Ladysmith and drops people off. They could not get on it to get to Duncan. They'd have to go with the inferior service that exists today and schedule.
They would have to use the local route, yes.
So, for example, myself, I can't use it to come to CBRD meetings. So I will not be able to use transit service to access CBRD meetings because the scheduling of the existing route is insufficient. So I think this is, I'll let others speak and then I'll come back. I'm sorry, I'm just so disappointed in the way that this is proposed.
And here I thought you were going to be all excited and wanted to move this. I'm sorry. Director Marsh.
Yeah, I have noted in past years, and I don't expect it's different, that Ladysmith pays an awful lot of money for transit, and I can really empathize with Mayor Stone because he's worked so hard to try and get transit for his citizens going north in particular, but now I hear him saying going south, which he's probably said all along. And so I also feel concerned about that. I think there needs to be a fair and equitable ability to use the service, particularly if you're from one of the funding groups that are paying quite a bit for transit. Now, maybe Director Stone could correct me if something's changed.
Apologies, I was looking for some stuff in the staff report and I wasn't listening very well, Kate. I apologize.
So what I was saying, Aaron, was I understand, at least from past budget years, that your citizens pay an awful lot for transit, and acknowledge that you've been fighting for transit and supporting transit. And I can understand why this would be upsetting to you. And I just was wanting to clarify, is that still true, that you're still paying quite a bit per capita for transit?
Yeah, when we went to the assessment-based model, Ladysmith residents pay an assessment-based share of all of the Cowichan Valley transit services, including the commuter service, and understood that that would be our investment in the future of this service. And when this express route came online, that would sort of make us whole on that investment, right? So a few years ago, when the taxation changed, we supported it, understanding that this would be the ultimate outcome. Unfortunately, the service that's being offered under this MOU is not what was envisaged. Now, I can see, and again, the staff report is unclear. It does say, and I can assume now from what Ms. Rondo said, that it doesn't say that in the staff report, that someone would be able to go southbound and get picked up at YCD and then be dropped off within the Cowichan Valley. So I guess that invisible line between the RDN and the CVRD just designates that in the CVRD area, people would not have full movement, but essentially within RDN, they would. And that's what I'm hearing here. But again, the staff report only kind of says Cowichan area, travel between in the 7 stops, local service in Cowichan Valley. Southbound trips would be drop off only in the Cowichan Valley, and stops along the northbound trip will be pickup only. Now, I can only presume that that only means within Cowichan, not within the RDN area.
Ms. Rondo.
That is the intention, yeah. And partially it has to do with, because we have 2 different operators. So the RDN is the operator for the Nanaimo Cowichan Express service, whereas we do have a private operating company within the Cowichan Valley. So the service was set up to model the Cowichan Valley commuter, which follows the same system, where the operator locally in Cowichan Valley takes the commuters to Victoria, and they are only dropped off, in the southbound direction. They're not allowed to pick up residents from the Capital Regional District within the Capital Regional District and, drive them around, because that sort of replaces that other service. So I do understand the challenge here, and I will just speak to our Transit Future Action Plan and the broader concerns with perhaps the Ladysmith service. We are still finalizing and pulling together the results from the public engagement through the Transit Future Action Plan. And we hope that through that process, we will identify infrastructure and service improvements for the next 1 to 5 years. I can't really speak to those yet because we're still pulling together the report, but it could potentially address transit in Ladysmith and improve connections there.
Thank you, Ms. Rondo. Any other hands? I see Aaron again. Go ahead, Director Stone.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to kind of keep going around on this, but when every discussion, and I reviewed a couple videos this morning of previous discussions at the board, and particularly my understandings that were expressed repeatedly without any kind of pushback, at least previously, was that once the service was running, that we would be able to look at reallocating, because you have to remember that this express route that was put into Duncan was meant to be a pilot project, to be a stopgap to fill until we had an interregional transit service. So we sacrificed, I think, 3 routes in Ladysmith and consolidated a couple more. We have no more waterfront service to Ladysmith. We have given up routes to reallocate the hours that were assigned to those routes to make the Couch and Ladysmith Express route work. So being that it was a pilot project and as a stopgap to prove the validity of interregional transit in our minds, was always that those hours would be reallocated back to local routes to feed the interregional express, because now we've got redundancy where you're going to split the ridership and decrease the value of the routes while maintaining limited local service within Ladysmith that were quote unquote Ladysmith hours for local routes previously were reallocated to the Duncan Ladysmith Express route, as was clearly said, as a pilot project. So I'm just challenged as to think how we haven't reflected on that, keep the operator whole by reallocating those hours to where is most needed within the local routes, and take a more thoughtful look at the interregional route, both fares and stops, to ensure that the redundancy of the Nanaimo or Ladysmith Duncan Express pilot project was not maintained. So it's just hard to defend from an outsider's standpoint, and I can get all the intricacies and inside, outside, and maybe the inside baseball of transit, but it's just hard to make sense of the fact that we still have substandard local routing in Ladysmith that doesn't reach whole sections of our community, and won't maximize the value of this interregional transit route because we've got no feeders feeding that route. Not to mention the location of the interregional bus stops and the lack of a stop in Chemainus. There just seems too many oversights here to move forward with the service as it's presented. There is a small improvement in understanding that you will be able to catch the bus southbound until you go through Cassidy, because one of the main feedbacks that I got was from residents of the Cassidy mobile home parks saying they were excited to be able to get to the airport and get into Ladysmith and then get back home to access services here that they're not able to access right now because many are low-income seniors. But looking at a $7.50 fare each way to go to Ladysmith and back, it's probably pretty close to a cab. Yeah, it's just really challenging because I think we really miss an opportunity here to be more thoughtful about routing and planning to maximize the value of the local routes to feed the express and come up with a better fare structure for the express route. But I'll save my comments for there and leave it to the rest of the board.
Thank you, Director Stone. I've got Wilson, then I put myself on the list, and then Marsh. Director Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I fully understand Mayor Stone's concerns here. And I too, I must admit, am a little bit confused as to why a service such as this would not stop in the major hubs such as Chemainus, Ladysmith, and allow people on and off. It's not going to, if you let people off, you can certainly let people back on again. It's I don't understand the reasoning here. And, yeah, okay, I think Rachel has said that we have to protect the local operator as well. Well, protectionism only goes so far. Let's start thinking about a little bit more consistency and a little bit more helpful to the commuter, who should be able to get on and off without impacting too much the express part of the service. So yeah, I think Mayor Stone, Director Stone, makes a lot of valid points here.
Thank you, Director Wilson. I too had flagged the lack of a Chemainus stop, and I guess I would ask Ms. Rondeau, how easy is it to amend this MOU and this plan to at very least, and aside from some of the concerns Director Stone raises, which are legitimate, but beyond that, how tough is it to add a Chemainus stop to this thing, both north and southbound?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, the good news is that we brought this report forward to the committee here in January. So we do have some time to go back to our partners, BC Transit and RDN, to review some elements. However, adding a whole new stop, for example, I can't really comment on that without speaking to the working group, as this may affect the hours that are already allocated to the route. In regards to the routing, the intention is that we stick to the main corridor as closely as possible and not deviate through local communities in order to maintain it as an express service. We learned from the Cowichan Valley commuter service when that was first implemented that once you start deviating off the main route to pick up other, smaller communities or residents from other communities, that the riders, it gets complained because it's no longer an express service. It takes too long. So we're trying to maintain sort of a 1 hour type service between Nanaimo and Duncan so that we can make it competitive with the private automobile and keep it efficient so that people can get to where they need to go. We've also planned for a connection in the morning, at least, to the Cowichan Valley commuter, which does make it an early morning trip there. So deviating off the main route would add time and make it an even earlier trip and start. Now, that being said, there are perhaps opportunities to locate a bus stop that's nearer Chemainus, for example, but closer to the highway. But I don't think that there would be much appetite, and I can't speak for the whole group, but I don't think there would be much appetite to drive fully into Chemainus. The intention with this type of route is that the local conventional service will connect to the broader interregional service. For example, I just want to share with the committee, in Nanaimo Regional District, they have 3 bus stops. So they have a much larger, demographic. They have 3 bus stops in their area, and we're proposing 5. And the intention with that is we're trying to highlight areas where we think the riders will most likely want to go and yet provide connections. For residents of Chemainus, they would either have, if they want to connect via transit, they have the opportunity to travel to Ladysmith via Route 34, or they could travel to Duncan via Route 6 and then connect that way. I think the focus would be on, in future years, improving the local transit service to provide more frequency in the local routes, and then focusing on connections that way, rather than using this route to pick up everyone along the way in smaller communities.
Fair enough. I just, for the Chemainus piece, I take your point about not wanting to take the bus all the way down into Chemainus off the highway. Even a simple stop on Smiley Road, because we are installing lights at River Road. That's supposedly coming this year, so the on and off the highway is not a huge problem, and it doesn't add more than 5 minutes to the trip. So that might be an option, but certainly to give folks in Chemainus the option of getting on that bus. They may not be able to walk to the bus stop necessarily, but at least they won't have to take a cab to Nanaimo. Director Marsh, then Morrison.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Through you to Ms. Rondeau. There is, I don't know if this southern part is Smiley Road, but when you turn on to Henry Road West, if you make an immediate left when you can, you go past a restaurant, and then there is a pull on into the highway. So that would be a logical place to have a stop. Particularly, people could have a coffee or something at the restaurant if it was near there. But I think what concerns me is what I'm hearing, and I really empathize. I know that it's complicated and it's difficult, but I think comparing this route and its boundaries to the Capital Regional District are kind of like apples and oranges, because their Capital Regional District has so many other ways of getting transit, whereas the Cowichan Valley does not. As Mayor Stone pointed out, if I was coming to in-person meetings, there's no way I could get a bus that would match up with meetings. You know, there's I think 3, or maybe someone correct me if there's more times, maybe it's 4 times a bus goes through Chemainus proper. So I just think this would be more feedback to figure out how can people who are paying for a service make sure that their citizens have access to it. Yeah, that's kind of mainly what I'm wondering about. I think it could use a little tweaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Marsh. Director Morrison.
I think Ms. Rondeau had her hand up, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, Ms. Rondeau, go ahead.
Thank you. I was just going to indicate that Myrna Moore also had her hand up and wanted to speak.
Oh, that's who I meant. That's who I saw. Thank you.
Okay, great.
I missed that. Go ahead.
Good morning and thank you. I respect Director Stone's comments, certainly with the connection from specifically the Ladysmith area. And with any of the express services that we have created with BC Transit, they have become limited stop only in order to make them as convenient and efficient as possible. I do respect the Director Stone's concerns from Ladysmith. Local routes could have certainly a lot more attention to them. And in addition to getting this interregional service launched, that's something that we can look forward to, as Rochelle indicated, in the Transit Future Action Plan, which is yet to be completed. In terms of our working group and putting this together, we have been working certainly for 10 years. Director Stone's very, very aware of that. And with it being an opportunity to be implemented within this fiscal year, which is targeted for end of March 22, it came with basically the circumstance where the RDN, the Regional District Nanaimo, had received an expansion package which was matched by the provincial funding of 2,500 hours. We were still working through the Cowichan Valley Regional District Transit Improvement Program for expansion within Cowichan Valley, but that had not yet come to a point of being approved. So with the RDN's ability to receive the expansion, plus they had some unused hours that had been created with their downtown exchange circumstance, that has allowed us to be able to create this service, get it prepared for this fiscal, and get it launched within by March 31st of this year. We do understand that the initial stops are pretty much what we believe are the key stops for now. As we had discovered with the Cowichan Valley commuter, there was a lot of monitoring and information back and forth with the public with some of those stops, and we anticipate that that will be something that we will explore through this process as well. So our hope is to be able to get this launched on the road end of March. There is a chance that we can tweak the schedule somewhat come September. The RDN is the operating company for this service, and they will have another rider's guide update in September. So we were hoping that once we get this launched, we have 5 months to look at the service and how it's being reviewed and used by the demographics within both regional districts, and work from there. So I just wanted to give a little bit more of that background to help.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Before I go to Director Morrison, I guess, you know, we've heard the March 31st date, and I guess the conundrum that's before us, and I would defer to Director Stone on this because he kind of has the lead in some sense because he's got a lot invested in this, is are we okay with provisionally doing this for March, or saying, you know what, let's just put this out until we get it right? I think that's kind of the decision that's before us. Maybe that's putting it too starkly, but to just kind of cut to the chase, that that seems to me to be the choice that's before the committee. Director Stone, your take on that, and then I'll go to Director Morrison.
Well, I have some other thoughts, but you know, I had a call actually from elected officials when a news report came out in Nanaimo yesterday from RDN, and I'm not sure that whether we approve it or not will be the issue, based on what I heard from some elected officials at the RDN, based on what was presented here that was picked up by the news. And when the article came out yesterday, apparently it has caused some feather ruffling to the north, with concerns around the routing and not the routing, the stops and the limitations on pickup and drop off. But there is some clarity that wasn't, as clear to me this morning, around the drop off thing. Just being limited within the Cowichan area, which I think is a real shame, because that means as a 50% partner, you won't have full 50% of service, because we've limited service in the southbound direction within Cowichan to eliminate the accessibility to people, including myself, let alone all those folks that were really hoping for the better scheduling that was coming with the express route to supplant the challenging scheduling of 4 trips a day with the current Cowichan Ladysmith Express. So to me, the Chemainus issue was more, what does North Cowichan think of this? I was just shocked when I didn't see any stop at Henry Road, incorporating Smiley and or the access road by the hideaway there. It literally, and I know a minute is an hour in transit time, but it just seems so much of the actual practical implementation seems to be sort of flying in the face of the realities that we're dealing with, right? Like, we have low ridership, better ridership than on some routes, but low ridership on the Cowichan Duncan or the Duncan Ladysmith Express because of the poor scheduling. It's just not workable for most folks. So I had said, like, if we could pick up in the southbound direction, I would use it to come to meetings. Other people could use it to actually functionally access services and work opportunities. This is supposed to be an interregional service, not a one-way commuter service. And because you have 7 trips a day or 6 or 7 trips a day, but you can't pick up the bus in Ladysmith and go to Duncan at any of those trips. It just seems nonsense. It's so hard to justify that when the understanding that we had gone to this very date with was that we would be looking at reallocating the Cowichan pilot project between Ladysmith and Duncan to better service local routes that would feed this express opportunity. So I'm not sure, if there's any opportunity to have further discussion and reevaluate that decision, I think that we need to take that opportunity, and I would prefer to refer this back and see that opportunity be fleshed out rather than to approve this today, because I don't feel this is defensible from my point of view, and I don't think I can support it as presented.
We've got Director Morrison, then Salmon, but I see Ms. Rondo has her hand up again.
Ms. Moore asked to respond to Director.
Ms. Moore or Ms. Rondo? I think both of you had your hands up.
I had my hand up. Yeah, I just wanted to also add that the expansion that had been approved, the 2,500 hours per year for RDN, was approved with the province matching the funding. Those 2,500 hours for their expansion needed to be implemented within this fiscal year. So with that amount plus their additional unused hours to allocate the 5,300 annual hour total, if this does get delayed, that is an issue that we would have to consider. The concern about the expansion process is that the dollars are allocated for the fiscal year that they are approved in. So just an additional concern that if this does not get implemented by the end of this fiscal, and those hours were definitely initially provided to the RDN for expansion within their local system, that might be something that gets reconsidered. So just a bit more for consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Ms. Rondo.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to advise the committee that the the RDN Transit Select Committee, from my understanding, is reviewing the MOU at their January 27th meeting. So unfortunately, they haven't had the opportunity yet to review it just because of their meeting schedule and our meeting schedule. We made the decision to bring our report forward at this meeting. And just more broadly, I wanted to echo what Myrna said, is that we do want to just be cautious that if we add additional stops or make changes that could add extra time into this route, that we may sacrifice some of the hours and the trip times. So we may have to reduce the number of trips per day. I can't say whether that would occur, based on adding a stop at Henry Road or not, but those are things that we would have to look at. And our intention, as Myrna indicated, is to, because we're under a significant time crunch, to use these hours before the end of this fiscal year. So March 31st, the route has to be implemented. Because we're under that time crunch, our intention is that we, implement the route, and then we'll monitor. And as Myrna indicated, the RDN does do a new rider's guide in the fall, so September 2022. But I just leave those thoughts.
Thank you for that. Director Morrison, then Salmon, and then back to Stone. Director Morrison.
Thank you, both Ms. Moore and Ms. Rondeau, for those thoughts. And what I'm going to share next is, I guess, a little bit anecdotal in that I don't know that we've launched a service that we actually got right out of the gate. And it's, that's a bit of a challenge. I know that we've been fortunate in that we've had both BC Transit staff and our staff working hard on things that have proven to be very difficult to get right at the beginning. So I'm now hearing from Ms. Rondeau and Ms. Moore that we've got some time crunch. I don't know why, but when I heard them speaking, I was the thought that came to mind that, one bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, and I kind of think that we may be in a position where we're forced. But I would also suggest that those of us that have been here a little while have also had the benefit of the fact that BC Transit has brought a lot of resources to us in the past, and I'm talking about talent and skill and their planning staff, and I'm sure that there's a bunch at the RDN that are very skilled at explaining, not to say that our staff and Ms. Moore haven't explained, but there are technical challenges in this science of planning transit routes that it's a little foolhardy for us to sit here and throw out suggestions. Now, of course, Director Stone has been far more invested and far closer to this than the rest of us have. But I would suggest that this might be one of those cases where we have some faith that we may not have put the absolute best perfect product out there as it starts, but I seem to think we've heard a commitment from BC Transit and from our staff that we will try and tweak and adjust from the implementation time until new scheduling comes out, new schedules and books come out, so that we can make those tweaks. So it's, as I say, it's hard to get it perfect right out of the gate. Apparently this isn't, but I'd suggest that moving forward, to ensure that we get the buses running, we start the service, and make the changes as we've done with just about every other service. I think we had a service here that went out to Area E that went one direction only. And we found that, that had to be changed. We had to have it run in two directions. Took a few years to do that. But I think this is a higher priority, and if there are tweaks and changes that need to be made, that staff and BC Transit have heard us. And it might be helpful if we were to hear from the working group that's put so much time and effort into this. So that would be my suggestion, if we could move forward on this, but also maybe hear some of the technical rationale as to how this came about, and it may help to settle some fears that directors have. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Morrison. Director Salmon.
Yeah, thank you. So very interesting. I'm sympathetic to Director Stone, and I'm just particularly on the drop-off only, pick-up only parts that seem like that could possibly be looked at again. So just picking up on, I think Ms. Rondeau said, fortunately it is January. We do have a little bit of time. So I think if Director Stone had wanted to refer this back to see if there are any creative solutions, I would support that. Thank you.
Director Stone.
Sorry, and it could be solved by removing that like limitation. So I'll give you a scenario. Somebody gets on the bus in Duncan and tries to get off in Ladysmith. Is the driver going to prevent them from leaving the bus? It's a serious question. Like, are we actually going to hold people hostage until they arrive within the RDN?
Yeah.
Like, I don't functionally understand. I understand the Cowichan commuter. Those people are getting on directly to go to, and there's no stops between the south end, and they're all getting on there with the destination being Victoria. But what happens if I decide to get on the bus in Duncan and get off in Ladysmith? Is the bus driver going to stop me, right? Like, it just doesn't seem well thought through, and I think it can be solved by saying get on, get off at any stop. It'll maximize the revenues for the route, it'll maximize the cost recovery, provide the ultimate convenience to people, and properly service the route. So it can be easily solved by taking away that provision of only pick up and drop off in one direction, from my perspective. I did receive a text saying that, you know, I understand now it's 2 weeks until it goes to RDN Transit Committee, so we do have time because we have another committee of the whole meeting in 2 weeks from today. So we're lining up with their transit meeting, and we have time because I have received text this morning based on that news report that at the RDN, it's not assured that this MOU as it's presented with the limitations on pickup and drop off will be approved either. So it may not be our decision if RDN says, well, we have other high priority transit priorities, we'll reallocate the hours to those priorities. Then this conversation we're having today is not really the end of the conversation. So I think it can be fixed. I can't speak to the Chemainus thing. I was just shocked to see that there was absolutely no servicing of that, you know, 5,000 to 10,000 people population unless they decided to take a schedule. But looking at the schedules here, I'm not sure that the schedules from Chemainus to Ladysmith really line up well enough with the interregional route to make that work. And they wouldn't be allowed to be picked up going southbound from Ladysmith anyway to get to Duncan. So there's a lot of things that could be solved by just taking away that limitation on pickup and drop off. And I'd be happy to support it with that limitation removed. But I would, in the meantime, say that we should refer it back to explore that possibility rather than to approve it the way it's presented. So I would make the referral motion back to staff to investigate the pickup and drop off limitation to come back to the next committee of the whole meeting, which would align with the discussion at RDN and possibly save it from being defeated there.
Director Staples, was that a second? Okay. I'm just going to inject myself, and this is in some sense on the propriety of referral, because part of this is the expectations of what we would like to see coming back. I take the point that we're talking two different operators here and that we're trying to maintain a level playing field and that we don't want you know, the one operator cannibalizing traffic from the other by doing internal stuff. Is there some way that we could build in, and I know this gets complicated, some kind of a financial formula that compensates or that looks at those financial inequities for the two operators, and at the end of the year, you know, somebody cuts a check to somebody else to balance it all out? Is that something that might potentially be identified in a report that comes back based on the referral? I guess that would be for Ms. Moore or Ms. Rondeau. Is that even a possibility?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure that is I'm not sure that the financials are really the issues. I think it also has to do with the labor as well, but I'm not an expert there. So I would defer to BC Transit, and you know, it's certainly something that I can look into if that's the will of the committee.
All right. Director Staples had her hand up on referral.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just feel that in increasing the not necessarily the capacity, but in increasing the ability for people to get on and off where it makes sense along that route is really the spirit behind this. And for us to continue to grow transportation, there's going to be times when, you know, sure, this may take a few people from one route to another, but it should also add more people from one route. It should also add people overall that are using the system. So I don't see making it so that more people can use this functionally as something that's going to detract from transit. It's going to add to the building of transit use. So, yeah, I'm a bit confused as to why we wouldn't just go ahead and make these changes, even without the referral, that there should be ability in both directions. Because this is a step towards, you know, a larger transit goal of the island. We're so, and this route in particular, for so many people accessing, you know, I just think of the university and the ability for people to access that, and how many young people that I have worked with and heard over the years that don't go because they can't get there or back. And so why would we inhibit people's ability to use this? Because again, I think that it may for a while be a bit unbalanced, but it should, as it's supposed to, continue to grow, then it just makes sense that, you know, we ride through that possibility of stealing, you know, a few bodies from one to the other, because we're going to add overall to use. So I support the referral, but I would have really rather just seen this changed.
Thank you, Director Staples. Director Nicholson, did you put your hand up, or were you reaching for your water thing? I wasn't sure. I saw some movement on your screen. You're good? All right. Director Smith.
Thank you. I hear that, you know, Director Stone, I understand his looking for a better connections for the community of Ladysmith and what they have given up in other routes that would feed this route. And I think that is it possible to look at the feeder connection to the hub that would be created in Ladysmith, that the feeder times from Chemainus would be connecting with that as you work through the schedules? And maybe that's something that is possible, that the feeders connect and work for the communities like Chemainus, and instead of people having to go all the way to, say, Smiley Road and that situation, that they could hop on the bus in Chemainus, they could go to the hub that would be located in Ladysmith, and then they could continue the journey to where they're going, whether it's the airport or downtown Nanaimo. Is that a possibility? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think, you know, we've identified that for staff, that somehow we need to include Chemainus. Maybe that's one of the options. Assuming we do a referral like this, we're going to get a report back, and they've heard some of the concerns. The Chemainus piece is one of them, and that may be one of the answers. I'm not sure. Ms. Rondeau, I see you have your electronic hand up. Does that mean you have your hand up, or did you forget to put it down earlier?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, it's a real hand. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Just in terms of the comments made by Director Staples, and any referral, I do want to make clear. I want to understand, you know, if a referral motion is passed, what we're to bring back, and also that in terms of Director Staples suggesting to make any changes, I do want to remind the committee that, of course, we have to work with our other partners, the Regional District of Nanaimo and BC Transit, because they're parties to this memorandum as well.
Okay. I think you've heard quite clearly the concerns about pick-up and drop-off in each direction, and whether that has to stay within those jurisdictions, the piece that Director Stone raised. And I think you've heard about the notion of service to Chemainus, facilitating that either with an extra stop at Henry Road or, as we heard from Director Smith, maybe integrating it with the Chemainus to Ladysmith service somehow so that the schedules mesh. Those for certain are two of the things we need to hear back, and based on what we've heard from Director Stone, some of those concerns about pickup and drop-off are also being expressed north of the RDN boundary line, so perhaps there'll be a referral coming from there as well, and it becomes part of a broader discussion. I'm just hoping we can get this done by the end of March. Director Stone.
Thank you. And I would just say that having heard from the chair, they'll be discussing it on the 27th and looking to what comes back to us on the 26th with a lot of interest. I get the sense that they're not comfortable with what's being presented, and they are aware because they've looked at our agenda.
Okay, good. All right. I don't see any other hands, so I'm going to call, Director Morrison. I'm sorry.
Just real quickly, I'm sort of having a little deja vu here. I'm wondering if when the report comes back, if we might be able to muster some of the planning staff, like the transit planning staff and RDN planning staff, to perhaps participate in our meeting, because it's, there's lots of great ideas being tossed out, but I kind of like to hear the science and the practicality of how these routes are being planned and the hours that are available and the like. So I don't know if that's possible. I think I saw Ms. Moore had her hand up earlier, but it would be nice to have the people actually doing the work to perhaps explain some of the ramifications and restrictions that are part of this developing these routes. Thank you.
Appreciate that. And we as politicians sometimes tend to get down into the weeds and try to be transit planners, and that's never a good idea. All right, I'm going to call the question on the referral motion. All in favor? And opposed? The motion to refer is carried. All right, Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item R4 is a report from Community Services Department regarding the Missachi Lake Volunteer Fire Department Community Works Funds for Fire Engine, and the proposed recommendation is that it be recommended to the board on January 12th that up to $84,000 of community works funding allocated to Electoral Area F, Cowichan Lake South, Scotts Falls, be used for the purchase of the fire engine for the Missachi Lake Volunteer Fire Department.
Last time I made the mistake of assuming somebody wanted to make the motion, but Director Morrison, do you want to make the motion? Thank you. Can I have a seconder? Director McGonigal. Any discussion on this one? Seeing no hands, all in favor of the motion? And opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much, Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's no requests to participate in question period and no closed session agenda, so we'll just be looking to a motion to adjourn.
All right. It's 10:38, and I have a hand for a motion to adjourn. Can I have a seconder? Okay. All in favor? And opposed? That carries. We'll see you all later this afternoon.